Hello everyone, it's Nita and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be doing the next installment of a series of videos I've done on my channel, which is finishing every series I am in the middle of. And the goal of this video is I'm going to be reading two books that are part of series that I can now finish. The first one is we are going to be reading the last book in the main trilogy of the Charm of Magpie series by KJ Charles, which is Flight of Magpies. And the other book we are going to be reading is You're the Problem, It's You by Emma R. Albin, which is the second part of the Mischief and Matchmaking series. Both of these books are also quite similar in terms of overall genre. They are both queer historical fiction. One of them has more of a magical twist element in it as well, and the other one is just a standard historical fiction. And I'm very excited to read both of these books. I've given the other books in both these series very high ratings, so I'm really excited to see what these last parts of this series will hold. So with that intro out of the way, let's get right on into the reading vlog. Okay, so I thought I would give you my first update on what I've been reading so far. I am about halfway through Flight of Magpies. I actually think I'm probably more than halfway, since the ebook in total is 199 pages, but I'm pretty sure that includes the short story at the end that is set after Flight of Magpies, and I'm pretty sure I'm at chapter 9 out of 13 or 14, so definitely over halfway. And so far, I am liking this. I legit will be laughing and gasping at some of the stuff that is being said. Just some of the character dynamics, particularly between Lord Crane and Merrick. They have just a really good rapport from knowing each other for so long that they will often make very funny digs at each other. This book, emotionally, in the relationship between Crane and Stephen, has really been building on the storyline we've had since the previous book, where that one was much more about them coming to terms with the fact that they love each other and that they want to be with each other in the long run. And this one is much more about them figuring out the exact dynamics and situations that they can be in order to make that work. Stephen, truly baby boy, we need to learn some work-life balance. Him being super devoted to a job that is incredibly thankless and that vastly undervalues and underpays him is the main focus of his emotional journey in this book. And then Crane, I feel is a suitable level of rich bitch privileged, while at the same time being understandable and where he's coming from. He's very right in telling Stephen that he should quit his job because they're probably going to close and they don't value him or pay him as much as he deserves. But at the same time, you can see his privilege come through. Even though he has worked a lot in his life, he has also gained a lot through his status as a lord versus Stephen being a commoner. So him being oh, you should just quit when Stephen obviously needs this job in order to have a roof over his head is just him ignoring the fact that Stephen is a commoner and he has to actually work in order to survive. Versus Crane, who does have his built up empire, also can just fall back on his family money and doesn't have to work if he didn't want to. So I feel the emotional storyline that they're going on is well written and both understandable from each character's perspective, which I definitely really appreciate in terms of building up tension and seeing their emotional development. I also am enjoying the overarching plot a little bit more than I was the previous one. I feel that one, it was a random villain of the day type scenario, whereas this one we were bringing back in the villains from the first book. I also really like the introduction of the character Jonah as this flirtatious thief that tries to hit on Crane. And when we ended up meeting him, in the back of my mind, I was oh, I wonder if he is a character that is focused on in one of the extended universe side story books. And he is. So I'm very excited to see what his book will be like when I eventually read it in the future. But yeah, that is my update for reading this so far. I'll probably end up finishing reading this book either on my commute or on my lunch breaks in the next couple days when I'm at work. So I'll probably come back and update this vlog when I've either finished this book or started a new one. Okay, so it's been another week, and I have now finished Flight of Magpies. This book I really did enjoy, and I think I'm going to give it 4 stars. I still think that the first book in the series is my favorite, but I think I like this one a little bit more than the second one. I feel like the second one was a little bit more meandering in its plot, a little bit confusing in that I felt like it kind of came out of nowhere, with some of the like plot reveals and like lore stuff that got integrated. Whereas I feel like this one was really good for both Crane and Steven's like relationship development, as well as kind of like tying up some loose ends with some of the plot from the first book, as well as like Steven's experience being a Justicar and his like relationship with the other practitioners on the council. I also feel like the final confrontation in this one was on the same level of like the intensity and coolness of the magic that was in the first book, with the way that they use magic to influence magpies to fight for them, as well as the kind of like underlying power of the Magpie Lord and the ties that Crane and Steven have together being this incredible source of power that they're just sort of tangentially tapping into, but then when they finally like let it flow to its full capacity, it like really tears shit up, and I really like that part. I also really like the short story A Feast of Steven, which is kind of like almost a Christmas novella that was bundled in with this book. I thought it was really cute, and just kind of like a cute little epilogue for their story, really bringing together like Crane and Steven's relationship, kind of tying it off with a bow and fully like showing how much they mean to each other. I also do kind of like a lot of the like tangential elements that we get of Crane and Merrick's life back when they were in Shanghai, which I'm pretty sure there is another short story that's set during that time period that I still have to read. But in terms of like the main trilogy, I have now officially like finished that. So I feel like mentally I can kind of check this one off as a completed series, even if there are some like more tangential short stories and extended universe books to eventually read. But now that we have finished that book, I can move on to the next book for this vlog. And I think I'm going to start reading the next book in the Mischief and Matchmaking series by Emma R. Albin. This one is called You're the Problem, It's You. Obviously another Taylor Swift reference in the title, similarly to how the first book, Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, is another lyric. And this one is following the two cousins of the main girls from Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, who are James and Bobby. It seems like, at least from the end of the previous book, that Beth and Gwen, in order to be able to stay together, they have realized that both of their cousins are gay, and they want to kind of pair the two of them off so they can have two like lavender marriages, where then Gwen and Beth can be a couple and then Bobby and James can be a couple. But it seems like, at least from the setup of this book, the two of the guys do not get along, so we're going to get a kind of like rivals to lovers, enemies to lovers type story, with the two of them kind of being forced to interact with their meddling cousins trying to set them up together. I think the premise sounds really cute, and I'm really excited to see what their dynamic is going to be like. I mentioned this many times before, but I'm not as much of a fan of enemies to lovers compared to like other tropes. I much preferred the like friends to lovers relationship that Beth and Gwen had going on in the previous book. But I'm interested in seeing like all of the other elements that are going to be included in the story. So I have not yet started this book. I'm probably going to read it a little bit later today and tomorrow, and then I will come back to you with my initial thoughts in reading this. Okay, so it is now the next day, and I have made some progress in reading You're the Problem, It's You. I currently am about to start chapter 5, and I'm on page 63. I don't think there's any additional details I need to tell you in terms of like the overall summary, since pretty much everything I knew about this book going into it has been what I've been reading about so far, and there hasn't been any like additional twists or elements to talk about. I did know this was going to be like an enemies to lovers romance going into it. However, it does seem like that the two main characters don't have a like outwardly antagonistic relationship, at least so far. The setup actually is that James and Bobby had met previously when they were at school together. Bobby basically doesn't remember anything about James, but James had like a secret crush on Bobby this whole time, but he never acted on it or even really like spoke to Bobby when they were in school. But now that they're finally interacting, it kind of seems like James is like looking for a reason to dislike Bobby or like prove himself wrong in ever being attracted to him. And Bobby kind of thinks that James is a little bit bland or like not very personable. He doesn't really give Bobby a lot to work with and sort of like answers in very like short bursts or like one word answers. So Bobby really feels like he's like pulling teeth in order to get James to like him and to interact with him. So far, there hasn't been a lot of like angry, quippy banter or like any big fights between the two of them. It seems like them both kind of like separately seething and finding the other person a little bit annoying. But it's clear that both of them have like things that they're going unspoken, that when they finally like are able to communicate with each other, they'll realize kind of their misconceptions they had about the other person, and they'll be able to develop their relationship from there. I am really enjoying this book so far. It has a lot of elements I really like in queer romance stories. There's even this like queer gentleman's club that they're both going to, which of course just like reminds me of the Lucky Lovers of London series. I'm already starting to get like that ache in my chest and like feeling like I am becoming emotionally invested in these characters. So I'm very like worried for where the rest of the story is going to go. One thing I totally blanked on in terms of like the character dynamics and like relationships in the previous book is I didn't realize how Gwen and Bobby and Albie are related. I thought that her dad was their dad's younger brother, because they do mention that Gwen's dad is a second son. But she's actually related to Bobby and Albie through her mother, and her mother was their father's younger sister. The only reason I realized that is because there is a very handy family tree in the beginning of this book, which honestly I think more books should do. I really like having a like full list of all the characters that possibly couldn't be in play for a book, either in the beginning or the end. So with having this in the book is a really nice touch. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this book so far. I'm really enjoying it, and I definitely am going to be reading more over the course of the next couple days, so I'll probably come back to you in like a week when I have my next update. Okay, so it's been like probably almost 2 weeks since I last talked to you guys. Also, if the audio sounds a little bit different in this clip, I don't want to turn the heat off because it's freezing where I live, so I moved my mic a little bit closer to me to hopefully cut down on some of the background noise. Anyway, I have now finished the You're the Problem, It's You, and I think I'm going to give this book 3.5 stars. I did like a lot of elements in this book. However, I have 2 main problems with it. The first one is the fact that I feel like it was a little bit too emotional in some parts. That sounds kind of insane out of context, but I feel like it was getting really emotionally heavy for me in just like everything that the main characters were dealing with, that it kind of made me want to dread picking it up because I just didn't want them to go through any more hardship. However, I think that that element could have been curbed if I liked the main couple of Bobby and James a little bit more, which is definitely my second problem with this book. I just feel like they didn't have as much chemistry as Beth and Gwen did in the previous book in the series. I think them having a kind of like enemies to lovers start off of this book felt very like shoehorned in and not necessarily where I would have taken their character dynamic. It felt very much like we need to have an enemies to lovers trope because that trope is really popular, and not actually what their relationship would have dictated. Especially since we come in with the setup that James already has a crush on Bobby from school, but then James like completely does like a 180 and starts to hate everything that Bobby represents. I just feel like overall I didn't really vibe with James's character that much, and just kind of overall made me not really like their relationship. There were also just some plot points where I was like, how are you guys like not communicating? Both like within your relationship, but also like communicating with all your friends. The fact also that Beth and Gwen didn't kind of like tell either of them of their intended plans a little bit earlier on, even if they talked about it a little bit more vaguely and just told Bobby like, hey, it'd be kind of cool if whoever you end up dating and wanting to have like a long-term relationship with ends up marrying one of us so that we can kind of have this full lavender marriage between the 4 of us. Like, even like sowing those seeds a little bit earlier on would have been more helpful in terms of like the overall situation that's going on in this book. So yeah, those are kind of my thoughts on this one. I still really did like a lot of it. And even though I just said I wasn't a huge fan of their relationship, there are some really cute scenes in here that did make me like feel all those like warm and fuzzy feelings in terms of like seeing them together. But overall, yeah, I just didn't like it as much as I did the previous book in the series. I probably will buy a copy of Don't Want You Like a Best Friend, but I don't necessarily think I would buy this for my shelves since I don't really see myself rereading it in the future. But with that all said and done, I'm actually going to end the vlog here. We only read 2 books, but they did both finish off 2 of the series that I was in the middle of, which I am very, very happy with. If you guys enjoyed this video, please consider liking, commenting, or subscribing if you aren't already. Consider following me on the Storygraph if you'd like to see my reading updates in real time, as well as following me on my Bookstagram, which is linked in the description. And that is going to be it from me. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!